Good evening. Got a call to order the Committee on Infrastructure. Today is Monday, November 18th, 2019, and the time is 7:01 p.m. Will the clerk please call the roll?
I will. Alderman at Large, Michael O'Brien.
Present.
Alderman Tom Lopez. Here. Alderman Jan Schmidt, I'm here. Alderman Ernest Jetty.
Here.
And Alderman Ken Gidge.
Here.
Okay. Also in attendance is Alderman Patricia Klee and Alderman Richard Dowd. Public comment. Anybody want to discuss open mic at this time for public comment?
My name is Dave Manganello, 23 Portchester Drive here in Nashua. I have business interest at Riverside Barbecue, 53 through 59 Main Street, also here in town. Thank you for your attention. I know a lot of this is about parking. I don't know a whole lot about most of the parking things. I know that parking is, even though I have a dozen spots, probably one of the worst things on my side of the river. I have the luxury of being in 03064, which could be less convenient from any parking garage that exists, maybe if you left and went to Hudson. We're just on the right side of the tracks and the wrong side of the river, literally and figuratively. And I have sort of a continuance of an earlier proposal when the Riverwalk project was talked about and we signed the easement of our property to put the walkway behind us. I spend most of my life standing in my business wondering where the business is coming from, where's the walking traffic, that kind of thing. Right now there's one customer at my bar that we were pregame talking about this meeting, and we were talking about an idea that I've had since the city is already allowed to use a great portion of this ambiguous property of ours behind the building. It's a thin swath behind 53 Main Street that runs along the river on the opposite side of Clock Tower and on the side where the railroad tracks are that go through Lost 54 and I believe it's the old National Court building and then Cotton Mill on the other side. The white governor of the Mills house is back there, and there's already a parking lot, a first level parking lot right there. Gate City Church is next door to us. They have a parking lot that is immediately behind them on the other side of the tracks than us, and we immediately abut each other off of Main Street. So you get the mental picture of the visual. My desire is to never, ever, ever have a walkway like is on Peddler's Daughter on the side of my building, therefore surrounding me by public domain on all four sides. And because the walkway is sort of intended to go that way and we have no parking, my thought is some kind of, I don't know, you guys have the engineer eggheads that do this sort of thing. I make food for a living, but some sort of elevated, I'm calling it green space. We build a single to two level parking garage, potentially with an entrance at my driveway or at least a visually appealing archway, turns my driveway, which is the right of way for literally every single utility, comes down my driveway. The sewer water and the rain runoff, my doorstep is the lowest point on Main Street. It comes from both sides down, so they're constantly coming and doing, so it needs some attention. The place that the kid got killed across the river when he fell in the thing, I have the exact same thing in my lot. The city has put a Jersey barrier on top of it, and it's basically to prevent this year's runoff from having it open again. But they've made great measures to fix this, and this is not part of the problem. The problem is we have a whole lot of attention need to be paid to that area before we get this Riverwalk project done, and it's a completely autonomous thing to parking. My suggestion is that since there's such a dire need for parking in literally every business on my side of the river, I look at what Leighton House is and what Leighton House could be if there was just parking. I look at Lost 34 and Brady Sullivan that just put countless millions of dollars into bailing the church out from a, nonprofit ownership of this building, pay the taxes, this and that and the other thing, bringing a vibrancy to my business as well as others. There's no place for them to park. There's no covered parking at all on that side of And I have a unique space that we've allowed the city to put a walkway in, and that the city also, the state, the federal government with the railroad, you know, the state with the river on the other side. There's a whole lot of entities in play there. And so I could never probably even apply or get a building expansion of any variety, and yet it's in my best interest to be able to use that space. I argue I have the best outside dining in the state, okay? Hands down, 18 miles of seacoast, not much wasted on restaurants. I got waterfront looking at the literal definition of this city. It's very important to me to save that and to have got any spare change people on that side of my customer's view, you know, and the image of this city. I kind of, I'll do whatever it takes to not have that. I find heroin needles and all kinds of other things. It is a walking path. It's the easiest way for people to get places. We do have the luxury of the new Broad Street Parkway Bridge back there, which is elevated significantly higher than the ground beneath it. So my proposal includes some kind of, again, city engineer egghead idea of a single level high enough that a tractor trailer probably can drive underneath it or something, covered parking area from my doorstep on Main Street, down my alleyway to Front Street, and then around the side of the National Court building, as much as it doesn't inhibit anything. And you could do 2-3 stories there, but all of it would have green space on the top, and thus the walking paths. And so we would be able to, the church and Bonhoeffer's with 3 and 4 stories would be able to have landings and stuff that came out over there. I know that there's the train going through, which is a difficulty, but you know, a Passover, and if in their parking lot, immediately across from Triangle Credit Union and some of the other places there, and right next to Lost 34, you could build a traditional, however many story parking garage behind it. And now you've got that entire side of the river, plus all of the stuff that Broad Street Parkway opened up as a possibility, but is impossible because there's no crossing off of it like was promised at Front Street and Franklin Street and Baldwin Street. Yeah, I think that's the 3 streets they told us when they pitched that idiotic thing, but that's a whole nother thing. Parking, parking, parking. The city also has, this is now a second subject, the city has trolleys. The city has parking garages. The city has bus stops. Why are we not taking single on-street parking spots and making trolley stations that are covered, that are also bus stations? I'd volunteer the spot right in front of my building if I have to, in order to make this happen. And we run the trolleys on a schedule like we do all the time. And it can take people to the mall, to Market Basket, to whatever. We can't have Shaw's down the street be the only place that our walking poor can shop because they walk there. And we have an infrastructure and public, we can set the tone for public transportation in this town. And if we build a big parking garage, you know, on that side, eventually, if someone at the federal end figures out commuter rail, that line next to me goes all the way out to Wilton, and how great would it for us to be to have a greater Nashua commuter rail to get us from Wilton to the mall, and Super Walmart along the way, and Building 19 right at the airport is a nice big hub for transportation and whatnot. We don't need to be worrying about parking. We need to be worried about getting people in here, okay? Not everybody who's here drives and cares about parking. So it's bans on this and whatever. The on-street parking is saturated. You never find them, you know, and it's even the tickets. I'll pay the ticket versus trying to find another spot or walk 100 yards. That's the mentality of most customers. So charging more or charging more often, I don't think any of that works. You know, but just from a personal standpoint, my side of the river, there is no parking. So anyone who complains about parking on 03060, sorry, come to 6-4 and we'll show you where there isn't any parking at all. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Communications.
From Tim Cummings, Director of Economic Development. Communication regarding Ordinance 19-057 with Downtown Improvements Committee's comments.
There being no objection, I'll accept the communication and place it on file. We do have an additional communication. Alderman Clee, do you want me to accept this as part of the communications?
Yes, please.
Okay. We have before us request for handicap parking in front of number 13 Norton Street, which is on tonight's agenda, and a communication from Alderman Clee. With not being any objections, I'll accept this communication and also place it on file. Petitions.
Petition for overnight parking on 8th Street. Mr. Chairman, I recommend this be tabled.
Okay. Thank you. The motion is to table. I know we're not really supposed to discuss the tabling motion, but this was a petition that Alderman Lopez received. It has not gone to engineering. It has not gone to traffic, and it has not gone through the other process of fire to make sure that it has complete access. It was just a petition. So therefore, if we table it this evening, that can go in and become further as part of the downtown parking study that is supposed to be out this spring. So I'll accept your motion to table without objection. Alderman Lopez.
I'm going to state for the record that I do object, only because I've gone through the motions with several other pieces, and they were tabled anyway. So out of respect for the residents who brought it forward, I'm going to vote against tabling.
Okay, I understand, but you said you went through motions. What motions did you go through?
With all of the other motions that are tabled, like the one in front of Rise Barber Shop, the 90-minute parking one.
Okay. All right, I misunderstood because, again, this did not go through engineering, traffic,
Nope,
or fire.
that arrived on my desk.
Okay, thank you.
During the alternate
Alderman
meeting.
Jettie.
Point of order, if I may. So, so this is a request that 8th Street be added to the overnight parking. Doesn't that require an ordinance? Isn't it an amendment to the ordinance regarding, the parking ordinances in the city? So wouldn't we have to pass an ordinance to add 8th Street to the overnight parking? So isn't the way that this should operate is that perhaps Alderman Lopez could meet with the legal department and come up with an ordinance to do, assuming he's in favor of this
Right.
petition.
Exactly. Thank you, Alderman Jettie. It's fairly well explained because basically it's a petition to start the process, and we have well into the process yet to go on this. So therefore, if it became written as an ordinance, that would trigger exactly that start of the study from engineering, traffic, to, police and fire and everybody else on it. So that would come set to once the ordinance is written and they get a chance to look at that. You are correct. Absolutely. Alderman Lopez.
I'm opposed to tabling the acceptance of the communication, which is what I understand we're doing. We received a petition, we accept it. I can move forward with it or whatever, but I'm definitely not going to start by tabling the communication.
By tabling, it has no inkling that I am not accepting it.
There's nothing to table then. As I understand it, this is a petition. We're supposed to just accept them.
You're supposed to what, excuse me?
Accept them for the record.
Well, yes, and we'll accept it for the record. So if you want, we can amend that to accept it for the record. Okay, would the clerk want to make that?
I'd be glad to.
Okay.
Motion to,
It's just for clarification. It's nothing that we can legally do tonight
I
on
don't
this
think
because
it
it has
is.
no.
And that was why I was like,
It has
to be
no
honest, somewhat
process
angry
before
that
us.
like we were proposing taking a public communication and tabling it. So that's why I said like, no, I don't know what this game is, but I think it's a misunderstanding. If a petition
Right.
comes before the committee, we just
It would have
accept it.
technically come out to the both thing. It would give you the opportunity to go in to seek the proper channels to which this should have been done.
Mhm.
Okay. Alderman Dow.
Not a member of the committee, but a suggestion is you accept the communication and forward it to the transportation or the parking director, Tim Cummings, and legal
Yep,
for action.
exactly, for further action. Satisfactory, Alderman Lopez?
Yes, please. Thank you, Alderman Dowd.
Okay, thank you. Very good. So can the clerk, we have an amended motion now. Can the clerk read the amended motion?
I'd like to move to recommend forwarding this to the appropriate departments, placing this on record.
All right, very good. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Motion carries. Unfinished business.
There is none.
New business resolutions.
We also have none.
New business ordinances. I'm going to ask that, through the clerk, if the clerk would be kind enough to make a motion to remove from the table 019058.
I will do so. Authorizing stop signs on Dinsmore Street at its intersection with Douglas Street. I move that we remove this from the table.
Okay. Motion is to remove from the table. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? None? Okay. Can we have a motion on 019058?
Certainly. I would move to recommend final passage.
Okay. There's a motion to recommend final passage. If we remember, this was brought to us and tabled on October 23rd meeting. Alderman Dowd wasn't here, could not make the meeting at that particular time. He's the prime sponsor of it. And if we look up on the map above us, we have it here. And this is Dinsmore Street right here.
I'm pointing to it right up here. It's,
Yeah.
and
And the intersection with Douglas Street.
Here we go.
Alderman Dowd.
Yes, one of the people I can't remember which house they live on this corner, was concerned because this is the St. Christopher's complex, including the school. And the parents come in and drop off and pick up their children coming up this way. And this street is extremely narrow and sometimes difficult to get through, which is another issue. But they come down Douglas rather quickly to get here and get out. And the gentleman originally wanted a four-way stop. The city engineer and the DPW said no, but they did authorize a two-way stop to stop the traffic on Douglas right here and going in both directions to slow the traffic. It's not really to slow the traffic down because we don't do stop signs to do that. It's to prevent accidents because there's been near misses with cars in that intersection. So they are allowing a two-way stop.
Okay. Further comment, Alderman Jettie.
So I wasn't able to bring up the ordinance right now, but looking at the title, it says authorizing stop signs on Dinsmore Street at its intersection with Douglas. So the stop signs would be on Dinsmore, not Douglas. Is that what you want?
I know they wanted a four-way stop and DPW was allowing a two-way stop sign. And it may be so that because these cars come down rather quickly that they wanted the traffic stopped on Dinsmore so they'd pull out and get hit. So I'm going to defer to the city engineer if that's where they want the stop signs. But it's because of potential accidents in that intersection.
Okay, so the stop sign, according to the ordinance, the stop sign is going to be on,
Would be right
On
here and
Dinsmore.
right here.
right? So that's
Yep.
what you want?
That's fine.
Yeah, okay.
Further comment, members of the committee? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor of final passage of 019058 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Other new business ordinances.
Let's see, we have ordinance 19-059, authorizing stop signs on Charlotte Street with its intersection with Charlotte Avenue. Mr. Chair, I move to recommend final passage.
Alderman Dowd.
Again, I put this legislation in. Earlier this year, we had a car come off Charlotte Street around the corner very quickly. That was a rounded corner and hit another car that was stopped to let kids cross the crosswalk. Not a good thing. We have been working with, and I gave you handouts with pictures.
Yeah.
Are we there? Oh, right here.
Yeah.
So we've been working with this individual because his driveway comes out right on the angle. And if you've been down the street lately, we have a plan with the state to do a sidewalk down this side of the street, eliminate these two crosswalks, but it's been hung up with the state getting the design approved. And this part of that is to square this corner. In the interim, the DPW has painted a rather heavy red line, area around this corner to square the corner. Not everybody observes that, but they think that, and it's their recommendation, the DPW, that this become a three-way stop with a sign here, and a sign here. Because if some cars have come around this corner 50 miles an hour, they won't stop for that stop sign, that crosswalk, and kids could get hit. So they want to stop the car, and then when they turn the corner, now they'll see it's a school zone and it's 20 miles an hour. So it's the best we can do at the moment. That will become a permanent square corner in that area that's been shaded and painted red will become solid. And I forget what they're doing with this man's driveway, but they're working with him to have it come out so it's easier for him to get out. And he also has a problem getting out when cars come 40, 50 miles an hour up the street to do the corner, and he's coming out of his driveway. So they're also, I believe, in favor of this.
Any additional comments? Alderman Lopez.
When the intersection is finished by DPW, will it include the hyperactive little red dot, or is that just for us?
No, it won't have the hyper dot.
Alderman Clegg.
I'm not a member of this committee, but I can tell as a person who drives through that area a lot. I absolutely agree with you. It's death-defying at certain times, and there are children. And I actually have a friend who lives not too far from there. And yes, it is. People just think that they can speed, that it's a straightaway, and and it's even worse when there are school events going on, and people are parking all over.
The night of the election, in the dark, a car went down the road like 50 miles an hour.
Further discussion, Alderman Jettie.
So where are the stop signs going to be?
Right here,
Okay, so on Charlotte Street,
Charlotte Street.
you're going to stop there?
They'll be
okay.
on Charlotte Ave, so traffic coming this way has to stop.
Yeah,
And there'll be a stop sign, I believe it's going to be right there, for traffic coming this way.
okay, so could I ask,
Follow up?
so the traffic going, I don't know if that's west or south on Charlotte Ave?
Coming down here this way?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, so why would they, why do you want to stop that traffic?
You'd have to ask the city's chief engineer, who now is retired, but they wanted the three-way stop. And I think it's just to make sure that traffic through this intersection is as slow as possible.
Okay, Alderman Schmidt.
Thank you. Having driven there a few times, I can tell you that people coming down that southwesterly road, you can't actually see them if they're going too quickly. Waiting at that corner coming out from the school, having people stop on that street would really make it a safer
There's
corner.
vegetation here that blocks your sight.
Yes, it's very hard to see. Thank you.
I think in the queue we have Alderman Lopez.
I was going to point out the same thing. People come down Charlotte Ave would just drive into active traffic. Like, you have to stop the traffic so that people are looking at each other.
And again in the queue, Alderman Clegg.
Actually, I was going to kind of reiterate doing a Me Too on it, but the other thing is that I can tell you when I've had similar streets like around Fairmont and so on, what happens is if you don't stop that traffic, they just come barreling in and people are slowly doing the, hedging into the intersection. And I think it's safer to do a three-way. We did it at Fairmont also for the same reason.
I'm with her.
Okay, further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Refer to the clerk.
Ordinance 19-060, establishing a handicap parking space in front of 13 Norton Street. Mr. Chair, I recommend final passage.
Mr. Chairman, on Unfortunately, I
Yes,
have to leave for
thank
another
you,
meeting.
Alderman Dowd, for coming. Let me see. Can you bring that up? I think I bring it up 13 Norton Street. Should just click on it. Alderman Clee, would you like to speak to this motion?
Yes, I would. Thank you very much. I was contacted earlier in the year from residents at, excuse me, at 13 Norton Street. And one of the things that they had is they had a handicapped child, not a small child, not a baby. I think he's 13 or 14 years old. And one of the problems that they had was trying to get him into the house. There is a driveway alongside. This is a two-family. And there is a driveway alongside, but there are multiple people that are living there, so they're never guaranteed a particular spot. They were originally just trying to pull in front to drop, get their son in the house, and then they would go move the car. But because this was not a designated parking spot, there would be cars in there almost all the time. So it made it more and more difficult. And the only way of being able to do this is we don't want to permit a parking space for a particular person. It would be better to do handicap. In the meantime, the reason why this has taken so long to get here is that Ms. Rice got a hold of her doctor to get handicap accessibility, went through the state to get her auto placard and so on. And they've done all that, and we've been working through this. The property was also sold from when we first started this process, but it was a family sale. All parties have agreed, the original owners had agreed that there would be no problem with putting this in front of their property, as well as the new owners. Everybody seems to be on the same page. It doesn't seem a problem. It is a tight area, but there is parking there now. It would just designate that one spot right in front of the door and would make her easier to get her son out and so on. Once we put the handicap spot in there, she'll be able to park there all the time. Originally, when she had spoken to me, she said she didn't have a desire to park there all the time. She would park, in the parking lot, but no one would be able to tell her yes or no once we put that handicap parking on. I do not believe they have overnight parking there, so she will have to move her car at night to into the driveway. But during the daytime, the car can be there. And as I said, he's not a small child. He's a 14 years old. So it is very difficult for her to do this, and this would help her immensely.
Further discussions, members of the committee? Okay. Alderman Clee, you say there's no overnight parking, so she is.
I don't believe that there is overnight
Okay,
parking.
so-
when I went and I looked, I didn't see Norton Street as having overnight
So
parking.
they will have to follow the overnight.
They'll still have to go into
rule.
the driveway, and you can see there is a driveway alongside I think right alongside that
Yeah.
property there.
This is where the
Right.
arrow is here, but.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
There is parking here, yeah.
yeah,
in
so
here.
there is parking, and I think there's sufficient parking for the place. It's just more of her to be able to have access to be able to drop her son off and get him into the house. The other way, the driveway kind of slopes down to trying to get him out of there and around also made it very difficult. There are times when I believe he has to be carried and so on, so.
I have one further question.
Sure.
Like, in my neighborhood, and there's signs around for for a deaf child or something like that, then the child grows up and moves on. So is there anything that sunsets this or terminates it, or?
There is not. I would be open to it because I completely understand what you're talking about. I'm also dealing with the flip side of this, and that is that there was a handicap parking space put in front before I became alderman, in front of a home where the person has since passed on. The handicap parking still stays there, and now I'm going to be working to get it removed. So because you're right, there is no sunset, and if Ms. Rice and her family moved, this spot would be there, and we would have to do other legislation to get it moved and so on. So I have no problems if it were to be amended that in X number of years, we have to repetition and redo something like that. I don't have an issue with it. I think it's probably a healthy way to do it, because what it does is if they did move or any circumstances changed, it would do an automatic sunset and out. And I think that's a good idea.
Right. And the chair would be willing to work with you on that. I think
Yes.
that would just kind of help, as long as the sign is necessary, it could stay up forever, It's just,
Yeah. Otherwise, you have to do complete legislation to get it removed, and which is kind of what I'm working on, which means that we have to now contact people within the neighborhood to find out if anybody's using it. So that we kind of did that on the side. We checked to see if anybody was parking in there, kind of went back different times and so on. So then it'll be canvassing the neighborhood to make sure. I don't want to remove something that maybe somebody else started using.
looking for the follow-up. Alderman Schmidt.
Is this street normally very busy for parking? Do they find that they cannot park there?
Oh, yes. That's why she contacted me at the beginning. I believe it was the beginning of the year, towards January, February, March, sometime at that point. And that's exactly what was happening, is every time she would get there, there is a multi-unit across the street from them on Norton. On the other side, there are multi-unit places. There are some single homes, and her place alone is a multi. It's just a two-family, I believe. So there are a few of those there. Then yes, during that hour, she has found it difficult.
So if this was designated as a handicap spot, does that also mean that they could use it overnight?
I don't believe. I'm sorry. I'm not familiar with our legislation saying that no overnight parking means that a handicap park could be there, but I don't know. I can't answer that. I was under the impression that she would not be able to park there overnight, but I could be wrong.
And you talked to traffic about that?
I think when this has been going on for so long, I'm sorry. I don't recall whether or not I talked to anybody. I remember looking to see if it was within the overnight. I don't recall speaking to anybody to say if we put up a handicap, can handicap park overnight. I would think not, but I can't. It doesn't make sense to me that you would allow for one space, because it just asks for a handicap signage. It doesn't ask for overnight parking. It doesn't ask for anything of that nature. My concern was having to do legislation, that another body's going to have to come through and do legislation to remove it. And if no one says anything, that literally can become a dead spot, parking spot, in an area that needs parking.
Follow-up?
Could we build in a sunset clause?
I highly recommend that, and I'm more than happy to work with whoever to get that in there. Yeah, I would like it. And I have no problem if it's a 5-year or 4-year, whatever you think is the natural progression of it. And then if in that years the sunset comes, we do new legislation to re-up it or change the sunset date or do an amendment to it. I have absolutely no problem with that. I think it's a healthy way of handling something like this.
Alderman Lopez.
I'm a little bit nervous about doing this because, number one, I don't know that no one is ever going to live across the street that has a handicap and would then use the spot that the woman thought was going to be for her, because you're designating as a handicap space, not as this belongs to that neighbor space. Additionally, I'm not sure exactly where the authority for handicap spaces comes from. I thought that came from the state, and that municipalities could identify where they were going, but then the behavior within them, like they're reserved for handicapped people, I thought that was state level. So maybe one of the 4 representatives in the room could enlighten me, or the lawyer. And then the last thing I had as a suggestion was, as an alternative to a handicap space, if the idea is to keep the space open for someone who needs to load, maybe just put a 20-minute sign in there so that if she needs to have her son move in the car, no one across the street is going to leave their car there all day because it can only be there for 20 minutes. And then she could use their car when they move.
Alderman Clay.
I did speak to the resident, to Ms. Rice, about the fact that if someone else were handicapped and had handicap plates and so on, whether they were elderly or whatever the handicap is, if they had some kind of walkability, that they would be able to use that space, and she's quite aware of that. And still ask for us to go forward with it, and if that becomes an issue, then she would have to deal with it. Right now, she has almost no ability. I've driven by there a number of times, and while I can park on the other side of the driveway or literally on the other side of the street or so on, I've never been able to park in front of that house. That does not mean that any of the residents, if they were handicapped, wouldn't be able to go and park there. I just don't see it as, unless there was no parking space, I don't see that as something that they're going to want to do, because it's not going to put them close to their house. The house across the street that's a multi-unit is right there on the corner of Norton and so on. I don't know whether or not they would park there. The people that are parking there are the ones that kind of appear to live down the street a bit. I'm not sure. I'm sorry, my head's a little foggy right now, but I don't think that they all have driveways, and I think that's part of the problem. So they don't have adequate driveways for the number of people that are living there, and so they're parking in front of that. As to your comment about the loading, putting a 20-minute loading, I'm not sure that would help either, simply because it could take longer than 20 minutes to get him in and settled. And I don't know truly whether or not she's able to leave him once she gets him in the house and has to run down and move the vehicle. So I would be really hesitant about a 20-minute loading kind of thing. It's just not a matter of him being a package and bringing him into the house. I believe she stays with him and so on.
Alderman Lopez.
I brought that idea up because that's basically what they're
Yeah.
doing in front of the Mary Sweeney home. But I'm still a little bit hesitant because we don't know for sure exactly all of what creating a space for handicap parking entitles the person parking in it to. And then additionally, was said earlier, well, she would have to deal with that. We're the ones who would have to deal with it if we stuck a handicap parking space in the middle of the street and then the wrong person was using it. We'll have the same person coming back asking us to solve that issue too.
I can't say that she wouldn't do that. I'm assuming she's not going to do that. I think she's just
Well,
looking
her
for.
son and her issue isn't going to go away.
And she's been dealing with this now for a couple of years, and I think that's what it is. It's gone on deaf ears prior to my becoming alderman, and now she's looking for some assistance. And I think she found someone that was willing to go forward and do it. And I don't mean anything against any previous alderman. I think it's just that it was someone that finally heard what she was having to say. So where I can understand that, and I can understand the sunset, I don't think a loading is going to solve that problem. And it may solve it for one of the houses or something like that, where when you bring the patient in, or you bring the client in, or you bring the resident in, there's someone there that can take care of them. This may not be the situation with Ms. Rice. She's going to be, and that was one of the reasons why she couldn't come today. She had an appointment with her son in Boston, and there was a conflict. So that's why she sent this email, and I've asked you to put it into the record. I do respect and I do understand exactly what you're saying, is putting that up in if. But if we walked around with ifs all the time, I'm not sure a whole lot is going to get done. And I would
said
hate
that
for it to be
last month.
denied. I just hate for it to be denied that. I also don't want to see it have that particular person's name on it. I don't want that to create any kind of animosity either. So, but I don't believe that would be able to be done. I don't know the state laws, but I believe that when I looked into it, in order for her car to be parked there, she either had to have a placard or a handicap license plate. And we've gone through all those motions. She went to her doctor, she got the appropriate paperwork from him, went to the state, got the appropriate signage for her vehicle. I don't know if it's a placard or that's not my business to do. I just told her that car could not park there unless it had the appropriate. So it's not just like she can park any car there. It has to be a car with the appropriate signage.
I know, I'm handicapped,
Yeah.
so I get the idea.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but I from the beginning we made sure that all of those, that all those ducks were in a row before we went further with even putting in this legislation.
Do we have anything from traffic or the streets department confirming that they are okay with this?
No, I don't.
Prior to this meeting, I did ask the traffic division, and everything that's on this agenda has already been pre-approved from the traffic. Alderman Jettie.
So if I could try to answer Alderman Lopez's question about, do we have the authority to do this? Isn't it a state thing? I'm looking. We do have an ordinance called handicap parking, and it says that no vehicles other than those which are identified as motor vehicles of handicapped persons in accordance with the RSA shall be allowed to park in areas designated by this section. And then it lists, I don't know, there must be, I'm just guessing there are like 30 or so spots that are maybe 50 spots that are identified. Some of them seem to be, the handicap spots that we see that are available for the public, but there does seem to be, I don't know, maybe you're familiar with these locations, Alderman Lopez, but immediately north of 40 Ash Street on the easterly side of the street, in front of 50 Ash Street on the west
Those
side
are
of
by
the
the
street.
church.
Those are by the church?
Yep.
Okay.
One's by the park.
So I don't know if any of these are, it does immediately in front of the entrance of 50 East Pearl Street. Is that the Sweeney home?
Should be, yeah.
So I don't know if any of these are for, designated for a one private residence, 69 Palm Street.
That's actually probably next to no, that's across the street over by between West Hollis and Kinsey. I think so, if I may.
Go ahead.
If we have a list of authorized handicap spaces, then that at least tells me we're allowed to define where they are. It doesn't really clarify my question about once you create a handicap space, is what's allowed in that space entitled by the state or the city, but I suppose if we start proposing illegal legislation, then the legal department will stop us, so.
Well, if I may, not to interrupt you, but once we approve a space, according to state, and I'm speaking as the vice chair now, unfortunately, of transportation, which is my State House committee to which we deal with the handicap parking ordinances and motor vehicle law. To get a handicap plate or placard, one needs to go to their own physician to be determined. After they meet that criteria, and the physician knows what the state criteria is on issuance of a placard and or plate, then that allows them to mark the vehicle either with a plate or the placard and park in any handicapped space. Now, you may see in a parking lot where it be van parking, but that does not mean that a person with a handicap placard with a sedan can park in that space. Once all the handicap designated area means is anybody that is properly placarded or license plate can park in that space. Now, in this case, it is in front of 13 Norton Street. If there was somebody that did meet the state criteria of having a plate and or placard, could park there. And that would be unfortunate against the person who has petitioned this. But it would not be against the state law. So what we're doing tonight seems like to be trying to help out a lady or a constituent with a particular need, and allowing this space. Sounds like the person has met the criteria with her physician, applying to the DMV and being granted either the plate or the placard, so therefore meets. And we're within our authority to designate certain parking spaces. I know we have in other cases, and to make this, a handicap spot. Again, could it be parked in by somebody else? Yeah, anything can happen, But I think the day-to-day operations for her needs, chances are that she'll be all set in this type of situation. Alderman Lopez.
So either that or the 20-minute parking limit. The idea on behalf of the resident is to reduce the competition for that space. My only concern remaining, I guess, is if we do create a handicap parking space right there, we've identified a parking spot. Do we have to do we have to put signage saying no parking after blah 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 hours, or is someone just going to get a ticket without realizing why they weren't allowed to park there?
I think I don't know, but I think the petitioner, and I may be wrong, I'll refer to Alderman Clee, but the petitioner wants to make sure that that space remains open for her access. So I would imagine your 20-minute plate designated parking rule, somebody could park for 20 minutes, move the vehicle, another person dives in and parks for another 20 minutes. And what she's declaring is she wants the sanctity by handicap signage for that spot. Now, if it gets taken over by somebody with a handicap plate or placard, that's what the current state RSA allows. But the 20-minute rule would be detrimental to what she's petitioning is her need. She wants to have that space remain as much open as possible for her convenience in dealing with her loved one. Alderman Clee, would you say, surmise that?
Yes, if it were just made into a straight 20-minute, not a handicap with 20 minutes, but if it were just a straight 20-minute, the truth is, I don't even think now, unless parking started doing chalking of tires and so on, that anybody would necessarily even move their vehicle. Norton Street is not a street, it's wide, but it's not a street that people are going to patrol. I mean, I could ask parking to patrol.
Ask 8th Street.
Yeah, exactly, I understand that.
Where they show up.
Yeah, no, and trust me, they're in Ward 3. They're all over. I get the calls on the overnight parking also. But the thing is, I don't think the 20-minute would help. My concern about the 20-minute is, does that give her enough time to get the young man into the home, and can she leave him? You know, I don't want to say this. So that's one of the issues that she's had, is that they've tried to get him into the house. If she and her husband are doing it, one could stay there and the other one could go and move the vehicle. I'll be honest with you, I think she is extremely desperate and would take anything at this point, but I believe that we should put up a legitimate handicap. If this becomes an issue, I think we can take it up at that point. I don't think it will be an issue. I can never guarantee. I never say never. But I would like to start with doing handicap. I would also like to make the amendment to put a sunset clause in. I think that is a brilliant way of handling this. Because as I said, I've got another issue in another area of that, of my ward, that we have a handicap spot that is dedicated to that, and no one can park there because no one's handicapped in that area, nor is anybody visiting handicapped. So I think a sunset is an extraordinarily good idea.
Yeah, and the chair, if I may,
Yes,
the chair agrees with you. But I'm in favor of granting this, and like you just said in your statement, there's additional areas that may need to be taken a look at. So I would be in favor to grant on the need for this particular constituent, allowing them to have the handicap spot, and then look at the SEPT issue, which would be sunsetting and coming up with an additional ordinance, you know, have the conversation with legal at that point and traffic and the engineers to come up and say, make an ordinance that these must be 1 year or 2 years or something like that. And that might be all-encompassing, you know, that start a program to look. And that could even be the, you know, sick child or something like that, you know, signs that we, you know, warning signs that we see, and to relook at that.
I think that would be a really good idea, because there are times, I can tell you as a person who's gone through chemotherapy and so on, and there are times when you are considered, you can get the placard and so on, as you know, from the state. And if we could put one up that was 90 days or 30 days, whatever it was, this would make our life much easier. But to make things easier and to get more buy-in, I'm happy to put an amendment in this particular one for 2 years, and that we have to reapply or whatever it is that we have to do. I think it would be great for you to put through an ordinance that said from this point forward, anything put that way, but I'm happy to. If it means, excuse me, if it means that it can get through, I'm more than happy to do that, because she really is very desperate, and she's been extremely patient. I put her through all kinds of paces of making sure she went through the doctors, went through the state, and then we've done it that way, because I wanted to make sure everything was taken care of in that way. So she's been waiting a long time, and part of it is just because we needed to make sure everything was done properly.
Alderman Lopez.
Just to clarify my position, as long as I don't think we're overtly breaking a rule, I'm not opposed to it. And As to how to do it, I'll make a suggestion, but if the alderman who's in charge of that ward and knows the situation better is proposing a specific thing, then I don't have a problem going with it. So I will support this as long as, you know, we're assured that it's not gonna create any kind of conflict, and I guess that's what legal's for, so. As was stated earlier, the traffic department already said everything here was pre-vetted.
If I may, I would assume that legal would not have put through the ordinance if there was an issue. I would hope that our legal would not have put through the ordinance if there was an issue with it and that we needed other justification. They knew when this first started, I did get a hold of legal, and that's where I learned that we had to make sure everything was right, because we could put a handicap spot there, and she wouldn't be able to use it even for 5 minutes if she didn't have the adequate signage on her vehicle. So.
Well, the chair is in doubt at this particular time for the clarity of, right now we have the standing motion is for final passage. Alderman Clee, are you content with that? And would you work further to look at the sunset?
Absolutely.
And not amend this particular?
Okay.
Stand on the,
Yes, I'd be
is that
happy to
your
work.
agreement?
Yes, and I'd be happy to work with you on that.
Perfect.
Okay, all right. Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I will call 019-060. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. To the clerk.
We have ordinance 19-061, authorizing stop signs on Glen Drive at its intersection with Nottingham Drive. Mr. Chair, I recommend final passage.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Yeah, let's do 12. Can you type in 12 Glen Drive?
Glenn?
Yes. Trying to bring this up. Unfortunately, Alderman Gathright is not with us. She seems to be the prime sponsor. I am the second one. And what strikes me in my remembrance, during one of the aldermen's meeting while we were here, I think, but there was an accident in that area where a car flipped over and smashed into another person's property. And so the petition was made, I imagine, through Alderman Gathright, Harriet Gathright, to petition a stop sign at Glen Drive in the intersection of Nottingham. Again, this went through the usual daisy chain of, yeah, to the clerk. I'm only trying to just to get any Glen Drive address.
Well, I've got the cross street, Nottingham.
Yeah,
Can you,
yeah. Oh, click it. Which one here?
I would just guess.
What happened to your paw?
Oh, yeah, my paw is out
Which
of
one?
order.
Excuse me for a second. All right, here's
Let's
Nottingham.
just, yeah, let's just click one and see
Okay.
where it meets Glen.
So we gotta get some hold music we can play with.
Right, street name
Please
should
bear
be
with us as we deal with this very high technology.
Nottingham, try the other way.
Okay. I know I gotta
That might,
pull in. It is Nottingham, Nottingham. Shingle Mill.
it's a long street.
Nottingham is a long street, yes. Okay, and that is
South London
South
Drive.
London, actually,
All right,
that's,
let's try.
no, that's down here a
keep
bit.
it there.
Yeah.
Let's try Glen.
That's, yeah,
G-L-E-N.
zoom out a bit. Robin Hood. Nope. Here we are, this is the area, Northeastern Boulevard, that's where we want,
Stratford?
right here.
Glen, oh, okay.
Yeah, because if we notice here, this is where the cursor is. This is Nottingham and this is Glen Drive. This is the area that they're talking about in this particular area.
On Glen.
Excuse me.
So the request is on Glen at Nottingham.
Mhm. On Glen Drive at Nottingham.
That's the part that doesn't line up very well.
Glen Drive, as you see, comes off of Northeastern Boulevard and runs up through past Robin Hood Drive.
I can also see from the shape of it that it's angled, so, I mean,
Yeah.
at least when you're in Nottingham, you can see straight down the whole street. With Glen Drive, not even.
But like, if I may again, I think this was predicated by an accident and concerns by constituents in the neighborhood. Is there any other further comment? Alderman Schmidt?
It's easy to see coming off Northeastern, how if you're on Glen, you may feel that you can just zoom right up. And not having good sight along Nottingham, it would really cause a problem. It's not very clearly laid out there. I would say yes to this one.
Yeah. Well, again, if I may, traffic and engineering has gone down and looked at that intersection and has come in agreement. That's why it is before us, and they support. Further comment? Seeing none, I will call the vote. 019-061. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. We have basically come down to the end. General discussion. Alderman Lopez.
I would like to remove from the table, or at least discuss removing from the table, 019054, and that's because when we tabled it, I explicitly asked for an update on the parking study, which has not come. We got a communication from Director Cummings, which was literally the same letter that Rich Lannon sent, only this one was signed by Mary Lou Blaisdell on behalf of the Downtown Improvement Committee, but there was no estimate for when the study that we're saving all of this stuff would be from. And additionally, since we have the map up, you guys could at least look at the space that I was describing and see how it's an extremely isolated case.
Can you click up there? We'll go to Walnut
Do you know what number Walnut Street?
It's 136 West Hollis, we'll show you.
Oh, it needs capital letters.
Does.
Yes.
You have to shout at it. You know it was done by engineers.
You can only put ST, you can't put street. Just put ST, I think.
Let's fly.
It's easier.
Well, it's from Cedar Street, so if you put in Cedar.
Familiar. It's typing in the address is not really coming up, so. There's good old Sandy Pond. Let's orientate, see where we're at here.
There's a traffic circle in the upper, yeah, it's gone now.
Walnut Street.
It's upper right towards the middle.
So, Alderman Lopez, you said
Yep.
it's, or Alderman Jettie, you said it's near Cedar?
Yes.
It's right there.
Okay.
So it's a space between Cedar, West, Pearl. Wait, why did I get West Hollis? I must have written that down wrong.
Yeah, it's West Pearl.
Okay.
So it's that section between West Pearl and Cedar is the only area being looked at, and it's not even the extent of it. It's just in front of those first two buildings.
Oh, I remember.
This is like 79, 70, or 136 West Pearl Street.
Yeah, it's probably just the wrong street number.
So could I ask a question, Mr. Chairman?
Alderman Jettie, yes.
So as I recall, the area that currently has 30-minute parking is on the west side of Walnut Street. And I think the barber shop is the first building on the corner of
Yeah, and I think that's the east side.
West Pearl Street. But the parking you're talking about is on the opposite side, isn't it? It's on the west side.
I was talking about the east side, the side that's immediately adjacent to the barber shop, because that used to be a cab stand, so they put a 20-minute parking limit in there. So basically the police, or so all the cabs wouldn't block the road when people are trying to get in and out of that parking lot to the left or turn or whatever.
So the current ordinance,
Is it correct?
the proposed ordinance is to remove what currently says 30-minute parking. No vehicle shall be stationed or remain for a period exceeding 30 minutes on the following streets: Walnut Street, west side.
Not east side? Is there even a west side? I mean, is there even parking over there? Hold on, let me take, can you switch that to a satellite view? I mean, I can do it either way.
I just didn't know if you could see it up there, but that's the area you're talking about right there.
And I didn't notice the ordinance says west side, not
I-
east.
I think you meant east side.
I did, and I sent
Yeah.
them a picture of it. All right, then I guess we'll leave this on the table until I get the right side. However,
Right.
for discussion purposes, I want to clarify, those are the only ones I was interested in, not these ones over here. And the impact on the streets and surrounding area would be extremely limited, because the only ones who can really use that are the barber shop.
Well, yes, and then if you wish to promote it further, have you gone to engineering with this
Yeah,
and
however,
parking?
so I gave this to the parking department. They were the ones who wrote it. This is the way the street was before, so there shouldn't be any issues with engineering, but I can bring it by them again if you want. We're talking about removing a
Right.
sign, not adding anything new. And the
I-
whole prerequisite, or the precursor to this, was because
Right.
of the cab company, which isn't there anymore.
See, as what we have done, we could do a lot of things, and I'm not saying changing this would be anything, but I hate to see something change and then come back and looking, for a lack of a better educated term, goofy after the parking study has been completed and say, oh, well, geez, that wasn't a good idea at the time, when we're actually paying for a traffic study that would encompass this area and come up with the bigger plan of the issue.
I
But-
recognize that, but I also would like to point out that I'm in the position of not knowing when that parking study is going to start, and having been asking for parking review and evaluation on this committee for this entire term as alderman. Like, when
Right.
we had previous chairmanship of it, no disrespect intended, we did considerable work on on-street parking, on overnight parking, expanding the parking programs and everything. And for the last 2 years, I've been asking for attention to that. So I've really exasperated at this point, and I don't have much faith that when people promise things, it'll happen. I'd rather look at constituent concerns as they come one at a time, because where in the past that was burdensome because so many things were happening and we were uncoordinated, I've experienced almost an entire term as alderman where no planning has been done.
Have you had communication with Director Cummings?
Yes.
Because
The
I've
end
had-
result was that we would eventually have a parking study, the one that we have in our queue right now. And that was a result of the other issue with the street study needed for the hospital.
All right, because in my communication with Director Cummings, he leaves me to believe that it will be done this spring.
I just would like confirmation of that, because it's speculative as far as I know. I've had verbal communication with him to the effect of, we have vendors, which is what I was mostly concerned about, was nobody would actually offer to do it. And he has said verbally that he thinks it'll be done by February, but I mean, I don't even know where the Performing Arts Center is right now, so I want everything in paper.
well, focus on the parking right for now, but Alderman Jettie.
So I just want to point out to you, Alderman Lopez, that right now, 30-minute parking, the only mention of Walnut Street is the west side of Walnut Street,
So it needs to be corrected.
from Cedar Street extension to West Pearl Street. So I don't know what, on the east side, the side that you're apparently concerned with is, the barber shop at the corner. There's also a convenience store to the south of the barber shop. And I don't know if you've spoken to those people and how they would, I have not spoken to them, so I don't know, but I'm thinking, that the convenience store would kind of like the 30-minute, the quick turnaround, but I'm not. So if you're gonna go back and make sure you got the right side of the street, I would, we ought to talk to the other people to see.
So the convenience store wasn't aware they had 30-minute, but only because literally nobody ever parks there for that. The convenience store is very small, so people aren't like going shopping exactly. The owners might be interested in using it themselves, but the two spaces right next to Rise were the ones I was aiming at, and I wanted to take that specific sign away. So maybe getting the right side of the street would be the start, and then limiting it to that, like within 100 feet of X, Y, or Z. So I can do more to limit it specifically to Rise.
Alderman Jettie.
That's fine. I think that, as I said before, whether, if you expand the view, there's a big parking lot, the School Street parking lot where there's, 10-hour parking. Like I said before, it only takes me 10 minutes for a haircut.
Yeah, and to get that, you have to walk all the way around Nashua Wall and across West Pearl.
Yeah.
Where there's 2 parking spaces they could be using right there, except for a law that we set up years ago for something else completely. I mean, they might as well go to Elm Street, which is over in the other direction, but.
Right now, this is an advisory or informational type of conversation because you did not really make the formal motion to remove it from.
Oh, I did, but even I'm going to vote against it. I wanted to bring the topic back up so that it didn't get buried underneath the tabled in committees. And I'm kind of glad I did, because now next time I can amend it so that it's the right side of the street. So thank you, Alderman Jettie.
Fine job. Very good. So are we content? Very good. Okay, thank you. All right. Now general discussion. Any comments? I do have one for the committee at large. Talked to City Treasurer Dave Fredette. He will be at the next December's meeting. Some of you know we'll be discussing some of the delinquent properties that comes under the jurisdiction of infrastructure. So I hope that you all can be there. I did also take the liberty, I think I did put the date out, one of the potential dates in December. Because I know December and I appreciate you all for being here tonight. I hope, I want to get it away from Thanksgiving a little bit, so to give everybody pie makers and residents here and everything else. I know I got a turkey, I got to put it in for the O'Brien clan, so my family, we eat 3 turkeys, so we're getting the whole clan together. But we did move up the December meeting equally to encompass that conversation. So it will be a meeting, and as far as I know, it's good. That discussion will probably be the full plate of the meeting, and so there's nothing else really pending on that. So, Any other comments, general discussion? Alderman Lopez.
Turkeys. The Harbor Homes turkey dinner, Thanksgiving dinner, is next Tuesday from 11:30 to 2. I sent an email to any of the aldermen who are interested in serving. I believe Alderman Klee was interested. Alderman Jetty was very firm that he wouldn't be peeling potatoes. But otherwise, it looks like we were getting some support over there.
Alderman Clay.
Yes, I made 4 phone calls to Harbor Homes today. I've left 2 messages, and between their schedule and so on. So hopefully they will be getting back to me because I have 3 volunteers for that day, and I wanted to clarify the list of items that they've needed to see exactly what it is they still need, as well as one of the things that they asked for is their annual giving of, as you pointed out, warm gloves,
Socks,
gloves,
gloves,
and hats.
scarves. Yes.
Yeah. So
We're
I
all
wanted to make
cold
sure.
already. It's only like November.
Right. So I wanted to make sure that I've got that list out there also, and I do appreciate you bringing that forward. Thank you.
Just as a reminder, since we're talking, Saturday is Tree Amigos, so a week from Saturday.
Any other topic?
Sure.
Alderman Jetty.
The Three Amigos, those the guys that went to Ukraine? Is that?
It's the
Oh,
decorating
Tree
Delena's
Amigos.
house
Okay.
for Operation Enduring Welcome, which you are a board member.
So, if I may, Mr. Chairman, in Alderman Lopez, I have located the east side of Walnut Street from Cedar to West Pearl Street, and it's subject to a 15-minute parking limit. So, when you're doing your homework, it's section 320-35, 15-minute parking, and it's Walnut Street, the east side from Cedar to West Pearl Street. So
Maybe
the
we got
side,
completely wrong.
the
Okay.
area that you're trying to correct is now a 15-minute.
When you were saying 30-minute, I was like, it's not even 30-minute. But I figured I would just go check myself before going after it. So what was the number you gave?
320.
320-35. But the ordinance that the parking department prepared for you is dealing with the other side of the street, the west side of the street, which has a 30-minute limit on it currently.
I will go correct that. Or leave this one in table limbo and make a new one.
Okay, any other discussion? And Alderman Jetty, I have to ask, did you really offer to do the tradies there, the potatoes?
No, I offered to be a waiter, but not peel potatoes.
Oh, okay,
Pretty
okay.
assertive
No
about
Well, I was gonna
potatoes.
say,
potatoes.
treat the fruit to St. Patrick good, if you did, thank you.
So just for context for the public, I no longer work for Harbor Homes. I haven't since June. But the Thanksgiving tradition is a long-standing one. It's been going on for, I think this is 12th or 13th year. And then the second thing that we mentioned is I've been working with Amber Logue to decorate the Veterans Shelter for Christmas, like probably for 8 years. And Alderman Jetty and Klee have joined me recently. Well, Alderman Klee has. I think Alderman Jetty's on deck. So we typically do the Thanksgiving thing on Tuesdays with Harbor Homes. And then on the Saturday morning of the holiday stroll, we decorate the Veterans House. So you'll probably see more announcements and stuff looking for donations of holiday decorations, gift cards, that kind of stuff for that later on event. But I was just trying to make a plug for Thanksgiving.
May I make-
Alderman Clay.
I'd like to make a comment about what Alderman Lopez said. It is quite enjoyable to go. I was lucky enough to be one of the judges last year, and there's one particular floor that goes all out. Completely.
Never the same one. It's always there's
different-
one of the floors goes
Yeah,
nuts.
it was quite interesting to see how they all went, and they were given gift cards. They have a pizza party that goes on, and it's a really nice thing to do. And anybody who wants to join in on it, and they do. They decorate from their rooms to outside their rooms to the hallways. It was quite nice. Thank you.
All right, any other comment? Seeing none, no need for a non-public session. So, wish everybody out there, hopefully, I know I'll be seeing all you probably, mostly tomorrow night anyways, but to the general public, hopefully they have a good holiday, Thanksgiving, and enjoy with your time with your loved ones. And Alderman Lopez, a
Motion to adjourn?
motion to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned at
8:16.
8:16. Thank you.